Hello, and welcome to the Rough Edges podcast with Sarah I. Fox. In this podcast, I will guide you through my faith and mental health journey to dispel the stigma surrounding mental illness and to create an empowering resource for those who wish to discover more about these topics. I pray that this podcast will not only bless you, but that it will bring growth and healing to our communities. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Rough Edges. Today, I am with a special guest. His name is Dr. Ken Huey. Dr. Huey has been working in behavioral and mental health with a focus on trauma since 1994. Being adopted himself, Dr. Huey was always drawn to the large population of other adoptees in treatment. He ultimately became convinced that this population needed specialty care, and in November of 2006, Dr. Huey launched CALO, a residential treatment center in Missouri. CALO ultimately became the platform for Embark Behavioral Health. After selling his interest in CALO in 2015, Dr. Huey retired for some years and then joined Havenwood Academy as CEO. Together with the Havenwood team, he has guided the expansion of the platform to include all the Hope Group subsidiaries. Welcome, Dr. Huey.
Hey, thanks, Sarah. Really good to be with you.
Yes, I'm so excited for our conversation today. But before we begin, what are three things that you are most passionate about and why?
Three things I'm most passionate about. I think the first thing would be actually my wife and children. That's been a huge part of my own journey and making progress on my own kind of attachment style and getting through some of the trauma that I went through as a youngster. I really struggled with relationships, and that's been a huge thing for healing and helping me understand that, I really can sustain a relationship, be productive, and I don't have those fears of dissolution anymore. So my family would be the first thing, my kids. I'm really passionate about growing teams too. I just really enjoy a team and a business. The psychology side of it, putting together a really good team and having something take off and do well. Kalo did that. It's happening with the Hope Group. It's just really, really fun to see people kind of hit their stride. And I think the final thing that I'm really passionate about is seeing what I see as my people, especially adoptees, but those with a fairly deep trauma history, learn how to be in polite society and mingle and do well and have success. That really lights my fire, floats my boat, and you combine those, it lights my boat.
Yes, well, I love all of those, and I especially love how all three of them have connection. And I also appreciate how you said you like growing teams. And so, speaking of which, how did you decide to start Kalo, and what was that process like for you?
Yeah, you bet. So I was at a residential treatment facility. I'd finished my PhD in marriage and family therapy, started as a therapist, and it was great. But within 2 years, I got moved into an administrative role in business development. And that had me out touring and meeting other people in the residential treatment world. I was touring programs across the country. And by the time I'd seen 10 or 15, I thought there's a real big open world here, especially for specialty in a part of the residential treatment population that I don't think served well. It's adoptees that are just thrown in residential programs that are generalists and really don't have a specialty vibe in trauma and attachment adoption. And so with that, that had me very quickly, I'd say probably even before I got moved into administration, probably a year into it, and had decided, yeah, this is my career. I'm going to stay in residential treatment, but I want to open up the thing that I think will really help my people. And that became.
Okay, wow. I really love that your drive to help, like you say, your people, and in terms of like adoptees and everything. Like I really love that that passion drove you to see the need and also meet the need at the same time.
No, thanks, Sarah.
Yeah, of course. So, what would you say is the most challenging aspect of your work in trauma work? And also, what's like the most rewarding aspect that you've seen in working with the people that you do?
Well, there's kind of two different challenges. When you're working directly with clients, we call them guests. That's one specific set. So I'll talk about that first and then teams. Such trauma that especially when you've got a young person, 13, 14, 15, 17 even, and their prefrontal cortex up here is just not that well developed, they are struggling to maintain behavior and doing things that are super self destructive, even when maybe they want to be more high functioning. They want to get along better. They want to figure out how to have productive relationships. They don't want to destroy the relationships that they have. And they're struggling at a level that has them breaking things or running away and sabotaging themselves. That's really, it's just heartrending. I struggle to watch that. The other part that I struggle with is when you're building a team and you just can't quite help somebody to the level they need to be to perform their job well, and to maybe need to have them move to a different role, or sometimes you have to part ways. That's a real sadness for me too. I don't like that. I've had to let people go any number of times, a lot of times in my career. I've got in my team, we've got 275 employees. And so that just happens. And that moment is momentous for people. They'll remember me for the rest of their life, my name, kind of who I was, way I showed up at that. And for me, they kind of fade into the background of a long career. And to think that you're at somebody's toughest moments of their life, that's a hard one. I struggle with that. And you asked this, what excites me.
What's the most rewarding aspect of the working with the clients that you do?
Yeah, for me, sometimes you keep them safe for their time and they wind up leaving and they still have some struggles. The kids that I work with don't typically go home and get on the honor roll and graduate and run off and go to an Ivy League. That doesn't happen a lot. It does happen. There might be some kind of struggles. They're going to be a difficult kid in many ways.
Mhm.
But the majorities, usually around 81%, don't wind up going into a psych hospital and they don't need more residential care and things like this. They just start doing better. They'll track me down on Facebook or they'll send a letter that's heartfelt. We have them come visit once in a while. And to see a kid that just really struggled to maybe even make eye contact or not swear at you and such, being pro-social and maybe having a partner, it's just super exciting. It makes me happy.
Yeah, wow. I love that. And it's really rewarding to see because especially I'm a case manager and so I see all the time like especially the difficult ones like kind of do a complete 180 like they just turn right around and get their life back on track. Like that's a beautiful thing.
Totally.
Yeah, so we are talking about men's mental health this season. Dr. Ken, I would love to know what are your thoughts on the stigma surrounding men expressing their emotions and seeking help for their mental health?
Yeah, it's a difficult one to get men to power through if they don't have any kind of history or culture of doing that. I'm kind of lucky that way. I'm a pretty expressive guy and wear my emotions on my shirt sleeve in some ways. And it was never hard for me to talk about how I was feeling. I think that served me well in getting over some of the trauma and everything that I went through. But the stereotypical, buck it up, don't speak what's going on with you and everything in the male culture and the US culture, that's a tough one. And my real urge, though, for men that are closed off, is you first have to see it. Sometimes that's somebody meaningful in your life pointing it out and showing you that there's an issue here. But if you can see it, you can actually learn the behavior of connection and talking about the thing that you're feeling. And it's just muscle memory. It's like learning how to shoot a layup in basketball. I'll never forget as a young kid trying to figure that out. And I couldn't jump off the correct foot for quite some time. And I'd put the ball up and it would go winging off the backboard and fly behind me. Enough practice and people explaining how to do it. And pretty soon I got to where I could do the layup going off the correct foot and make it with a high percentage of shots, and ultimately got to where I just don't miss those. Well, it's the same way with being expressive and learning how to talk through the issues that you've got. You just have to practice that. And don't be afraid of the practice. Don't think you're an idiot because it doesn't come naturally. Shooting a layup didn't come naturally for me, but it ultimately worked out.
Nice. I also love that example because it's true. Like the more that you get into doing something, the more you're gonna have like an easier time doing so. And I think also what you said, a lot of the times with men, it's just recognizing it first because half the time we see that as normal. Like, oh, he's stoic, like he doesn't need to talk about his feelings, but he might be really damaged on the inside. And so, like in your trauma work, what are the signs of like your clients who may be very stoic or maybe not express themselves? Like, how are you able to pick up on that as like a mental health professional?
Yeah, sure. When somebody has in their wake, so to speak, behind them, lots of relational issues and girlfriend or boyfriends that it just doesn't seem to work out. They pick the wrong people. They don't seem to maintain friendships really, really well, or they're drawn to others that have significant relational kinds of issues. It stands out like a sore thumb pretty quickly. And you can just watch them trying to hold it all in. And if you can point out a little bit of what's going on and get them to use at least a portion of that prefrontal cortex to see the issue, then they can start making some progress. Although with teens, I have to say, I try to do that experientially more than talk to them. Talk therapy is not particularly helpful with a teenager.
I definitely understand that, especially that population like 18 to 25. I don't want to say difficult to work with, but it definitely takes more rapport building, and that trust has to be there for sure. So, in terms of like stigma with men's mental health, do you ever feel that you are not quote unquote man enough if you struggle with mental health issues? If so, how do you manage that feeling?
Yeah, I think that's a really decent concern. So I don't worry about that, but I'm also careful about where I let that out and talk about it. I'm in this venue to talk about trauma in my history. Yeah, I could admit that, for instance, I didn't believe I could sustain a relationship until I was in my 20s. And I did sort of rupture all of my friendships. I just didn't know how to do it. And to speak that in this venue is safe. And if somebody sees it and doesn't like it, I don't really care.
Hello again. Before you dive into the rest of today's episode, I just wanted to say thank you so much for your support and for hitting that play button. If you want to expand on that support, here are three ways that you can do so. 1. Leave a review. If anything in today's episode resonated with you, or you would want to share about how the podcast changed your life, you can do so by leaving a review on Apple Podcast or Podchaser. 2. Check out our shop. The Rough Edges shop is a faith based, women of color owned online shop where you can get a variety of products from tote bags, journals, t shirts, and more. 20% of the proceeds go to a mental health organization. So check it out at roughedgespodcast.com/shop. 3. Connect on social media. Rough Edges is on a wide variety of social media platforms, including Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, and more. If you want to connect outside of listening to the podcast episodes, you can do so on these platforms. If you have any questions, you can check out the episode description or stay to the end for more information. Now, enjoy your episode.
I'm not really too worried about that. But I probably wouldn't have that discussion while sitting on a bus with the dude sitting next to me. So you got to sort of pick where's your place that you can do it and be safe about it. Get the best people that have the most likelihood of listening. I have a couple of friends on this planet. One's name is Landon, and my co-founder at Kalo, my best friend. And I mean, when it's the darkest for me and I feel like I need to reach out, I know that I can call him and he's going to be okay, that I'm struggling. I lost my dad 2 years ago. It was an incredibly painful time. And I could reach out to my children and they would understand and let me just sob. My sister, same thing. I could just cry and that was an okay thing. My wife, when I consider, a failure, a big failure, I struggle really to kind of show up the way I want to in sports and be intense but not scare people. And when I have a failure in that way, I just feel horrible about it. But I can go talk to her and admit that I've had this failure and that I want to do better. If I choose the right people who can hold me in my pain and hear, I'm likely to have a success, which will also reinforce this behavior of opening up at the right time.
And I'm curious, to the people that don't have a community or a safe space to let it out, like, what do you recommend as like a first step into the right direction?
There are people that just they don't have those close friendships. Maybe they're struggling with their own attachment style or mental health issues at a level that they just don't feel like they can bond. I think that's where professionals really can come in. The single biggest predictor of a successful outcome in therapy, though, is the relationship with the therapist. Like amazing, it accounts for 34% of the variance in the increased positive pro-social behavior. So I would say find a therapist, but freaking interview them. Find one that you jive with, that you feel good about. That's who you go to, because that's the biggest predictor of success is that you're getting along well with it. You can trust and lean on them. And they are paid friend surrogates at some level. That's
Right.
okay. You recognize you're not going to go have a beer with them. You're not going to go have a meal with them. There's a boundary you have to maintain. But they do, done well by a professional, they do really care. And they can be that bridge to show you how to connect to then find your people and your community outside of a therapeutic setting.
Thank you for that, because I like usually when we talk about safe spaces, people always talk about, well, what if you don't have a safe space? What if you don't have a place to start? And I do agree with you that therapy is a great place to start. And it doesn't have to be when you're in crisis mode, like go to therapy. Like you could go for preventative care, trying to map your life out a little bit to try to see what areas of your life need better management. Like you could go to therapy for so many different things.
Absolutely. I do think it's important to even reach out overtly and spread the if you're trying to figure out how to create those relationships, you can pick maybe a clergy member and ask the clergy member for maybe somebody within their network that would be willing to kind of let you practice with them a little bit, half an hour a week or an hour every couple of weeks or something like that. If you can find multiple places to find those surrogates to help you build the skills to then create your own community, that's a win.
Yes, most definitely. And I like that idea of kind of like practicing before you actually go to the appointment because a lot of times with therapy, people don't know what to expect. And so that's like a great way to kind of ease the pressure, you know?
Sure.
Yeah, so I do have some statistics on men's mental health, and they come from a site called SelfSpace. And these are the statistics. 40% of men have never spoken to anyone about their mental health, and 29% of those men say that they are too embarrassed to speak about it, while 20% say that there is a negative stigma. So, what are your thoughts, Dr. Ken, on these statistics, and have any of them rang true for you?
Yeah. So again, I have the things that I struggle with are different than being able to express. So it's not a problem for me that way. But yeah, I do see plenty of particularly men that are stoic, that struggle to find a place to open up and to be vulnerable. I do think there's decent change in our society relative to that and more room to grow. So those statistics don't surprise me a whole lot. And again, I'd say that's about practice then and leaning into safe spaces to have your heart open and believe that somebody will catch you.
And what do you think are some factors that cause men to be stoic or to be uncomfortable with speaking out about their mental health? And how do you think this could be addressed?
Yeah, we've got biology going on. Look, I wanted to believe that I could just raise my children in a real egalitarian family with real good examples of male and female activities that everybody shared and that I could have more gender neutral kids in some ways, and it's flat out not true generally. Now that there are outliers for sure, and I'm okay with that, but generally we really are baked to have particular interests, and to be on the stoic hunter side versus gatherer on the female side. This irritates some people. I really don't care. The deal is we're baked differently in general.
Right.
So in general, again, the bell curve, we fall within the bell curve, and the outliers need care and compassion too. But this hunter kind of providing masculine energy lends to quietly going about that and not wearing, it's not rewarded in our society to wear your emotions on your shirt sleeve.
Hmm.
So that's a real issue. And what do? I think we normalize it. You get people that are willing from a really strong place to be vulnerable and to talk about that, particularly strong alpha male kinds of figures, and show a real connected side. That feels pretty great. And we've got some really good examples of that. Various actors and political leaders, even sometimes. I appreciate it. I think that's part of moving the culture in the direction of having some softness and having some ability to speak about the hard things.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. And especially in terms of like those societal pressures that have men being the providers, they have to be the breadwinner of the household, otherwise they're not as masculine as they could be. But I also love the fact that you mentioned that you have always been expressive. So can you tell me a little bit more about that? Is that like your personality, or is it like something that's always been there? Has it developed? Like,
Yeah, there's a lot of research in personality typing. And broadly, I believe that you can take almost all of the psychological research on personality and separate into four different main domains. You've got expressive, dominant, analytical, and amiable, and then combinations of the level of energy within that continuum of each of those. And usually people have two of those, one that's primary and one that's secondary. Expressive is fairly easy to understand. Talking with my hands and I'm smiling and I'm engaged, and this just isn't hard for me. Dominant is somebody who's a get it done kind of a person that sometimes people think they're real jerks because they can knock people over, but they're just a forward movement kind of an energy, analytical. They want data. And amiable really wants peace. They want to be kind of in the background, not necessarily with the spotlight on them. And they read the room and know who's hurting and stuff, but they're quiet and in the background a little bit more. Well, I believe strongly, I think the research would suggest that personality is baked pretty early, and that there's some pretty good studies showing ability to find out parts of personality in the womb, in utero. So certainly though in the first few years, and it solidifies fairly early, by that time somebody's 6, 7, 8 years old, you really can get a good read on their personality. It's going to be fairly static. I'm expressive and have been from the word go, and talked about my emotions with those that were close and safe. And even when it wasn't safe in ways that caused more problems for me, till I learned when to do that. And so I'm really baked that way. I didn't earn it. I don't think I'm fantastic and better at it than others because of something I did. Don't know that I'm better at it. It's comfortable for me. It's okay. I would like others to learn more of that. Just like I'd like to learn and work on, quite frankly, shutting up when I shouldn't speak.
no, honestly, like I love the fact that like from the get-go that you're expressive and everything. And was there ever a moment, because you did mention like there were moments where it wasn't safe. Like, is there a moment that you could point to where it wasn't safe and how you knew to get to places that were safe? Like, what was that like for you?
Well, it was very early on for me. Before I hit double digits in age, I can remember trying to connect and doing it in ways that just aren't rewarded socially. Trying to get close and people didn't know what to do with me, or ask if they were my friend because I'm just so expressive and putting it out there. That pushes people away, man. And so I learned pretty quick, don't do that. That's not going to do well. Not going to be received well. And there were just different parts of that I had to learn. And so I got to where I clammed up a little better at the right times and started to modulate and nail it a little bit better. But really, there was a lot of learning to do. And it was in my 20s before I really started to get that down and had friendships that were lasting longer than a couple of weeks because I knew how to hold space and to talk when I should talk and shut up and listen when I should shut up and listen, and just feel like I can be successful at this. But that took quite some time, and I needed some help that I'm able to give my people now. I think I probably could have learned it a little bit earlier. I didn't need to struggle as long as I did.
Mm. Wow, thank you for that. I think that would help a lot of people to know, like, hey, you can express yourself in the right settings, you know?
Yeah. My family is my biggest joy, and they'll all tell you that I've got issues. I don't have it nailed, but I've been married for 34 years, 35 years next month,
Mm.
and my kids adore me, and I'm not an ogre as a parent, and I was not abusive. I did not pass on what I was handed. So, I had a score of 7 on the ACEs. If you don't know what the ACEs is, I looked that up, aces2high.org. I've got a 7 ACEs. That's pretty intense. And I think people should take joy and hope from anybody like me. Not it doesn't have to be Ken Huey. Look, when you look at people and see that they come from a background like that and are able to figure out or get the help they need to grow beyond it, that should be applauded. And I think everybody should know it's doable. You can get there.
Yes, absolutely. And so, in terms of, we were talking before about just like societal norms and men's mental health. So, if you could change like one or two stigmas about how society views men's mental health, what would you change and why?
I think that society is not as freaked out about men being expressive as individual men are freaked out. I think the world would generally treat people okay that were a little more able to talk. So if I could change one piece of stigma, it would be the internal stigma. I would get people to challenge the notion that they can't speak because it won't be received well. Just be safe about it, talk to the safe people, and it's going to be all right. You're going to be fine. That would be the big stigma I would want to change. I think there's enormous power in the hands of a very few.
Mm.
And it's basically dominant personalities who wield their power wrongly and are bullies and shame those that are trying to learn what I'm talking about. I really dislike that. There aren't a lot of people that I dislike. I just feel like I can know somebody's heart with a little bit of time and I can understand where they landed, where they are. That's true of almost everybody, but the biggest bullies, the ones that really have learned to take joy in causing pain, to shame people, to hurt people, I really struggle with it. I know that there's hurt behind how that's created for them, but I struggle to have empathy for somebody like that. You just can't be that kind of an antisocial, narcissistic person. You have to get control of that. I struggle with that. So I'd change that. I would have that really not abolished by demand, but abolished by some sort of healing, and that culturally we just don't, bullying just isn't tolerated.
I totally agree. And I think that also ties into toxic masculinity as well, because you have this like notion that men are supposed to be these dominant figures and like these just the bullies, like you mentioned, like they have that because it's the toxic version of masculinity. And so I do appreciate you sharing that, especially because sometimes it is like, you want to feel empathy for them, but on the other hand, they're leaning into this narcissistic side of themselves so much, and society rewards them for that because that's what's predicated for men, you know?
That when we lionize that kind of behavior, it's just depressing to me. That sort of enhances and grows a part of the culture that we've done a great job minimizing. But then there's a swath of the United States society that thinks it's okay to just belittle and hurt the people that you don't agree with, no matter whether you're, and I see that on the left and the right. Let's not do that. Let's not
Right.
do that.
It just also bothers me too because it's like you guys look so dumb just trying to be like a bunch of crabs in a barrel. It's like, okay, what do you get out of this? Yeah, you're at the top, but at what cost? Like
Yeah.
it just, yeah.
I was listening to an interview with a lady who was talking about that sort of narcissistic injury and the deep insecurity and deep pain and need for acceptance, the hurt behind that, that has people clawing the rest of the crabs, trying to keep them down. That gives me some compassion. I do think that's true. but it comes out so mean that it's hard to keep that patience.
Yeah, it's very vicious. And that type of culture, and it's almost become like a personification of like, this is what manhood is. And it's like, no, that is not what manhood is meant to be. It's supposed to be some element of sacrifice or even protection or trying to, help each other out. Like, whatever happened to brotherhood? Like, why does it always have to be a dog eat dog world?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. You want to see what it really is like to be a real man. That's right there. My son
Oh,
holding my granddaughter, and my daughter's next to him, and they just had a brand new baby last night.
oh
And
wow.
that level of connectedness that my son-in-law Dan exhibits is so beautiful. I mean, he is what it means to be a man. I aspire to be the kind of man that he is.
Oh, yes, that is excellent. And that leans in perfectly to my next question about how we can reverse all of that. So, what do you think are some helpful ways that we can encourage men, especially those dealing with trauma, to speak out and seek help for their mental health?
It would hit some of what I've said already, and namely that it's about practice. I think if we create space, though, too, create safe space. So those that are secure enough with their own development and the idea that being open is worth it need to model that all the time. It is incumbent on me to create safe space for men to be open and connected, which includes, for instance, hugging. I hug like nobody's business. Very stiff and hard for some men initially. And I think we just need to continue to persist with that, even overtly talking about you're not even able to accept a hug very well, my friend. You need to let me hug you and let others hug you and be open to that explicitly, implicitly, covertly, and overtly be able to show what it means to be connected and create that kind of energy on the planet is just a big deal. I have two C tuning forks. If I ring one and just put the other one close to it, it starts to vibrate and creates the exact same sound. Love and connection is like that tuning fork on the planet. You need to keep hitting it every so often and pushing it out there, but it creates a vibrational quality on the planet around us that gets people resonating with that kind of love and connection. And we need all that kind of love tuning fork going on in the male community all the time.
Thank you for that. So, Dr. Ken, I want to thank you so much for joining me. But before we go, I have one final question for you. What advice or words of encouragement do you have for men who struggle to manage or seek help for their mental health?
Yeah, there is just a time to do it. To My advice is push through now. Don't wait. So if you are in the middle of crisis, if there's depression coming on, if you feel like you can't succeed in relationships, don't practice failure by waiting. If you wait, you will practice the exact same stuff that got you in that situation. And there is just a time like getting at the top of a diving board at 20 feet and you're scared to death. If you wait, the longer you wait, the more likely you are to just back down the ladder and not jump into the nice warm water. You got to just go, look, jump. Make sure it's safe, but go. Just do it. Go have the conversation, find a therapist, make the first step. Don't wait.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ken. And where can people find you if they want to learn more about you?
Yeah, you can find Hope Group at hopegrouphealth.com and Havenwood Academy, but I'm not necessarily on the Havenwood website. I work kind of a corporate role, but that's the place to find me probably is hopegrouphealth.com. And you can email me at kenhuey at hopegrouphealth.com.
Yes, thank you so much. And I'll be sure to have all of those in the descriptions below. And everyone, stay tuned for more empowering episodes on Rough Edges. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Rough Edges podcast with Sarah I. Fox. If you want more updates on the podcast, you can follow on Instagram at rough.edges.podcast, or you can visit the official podcast website at roughedgespodcast.com. Thanks again for listening and have a wonderful day.